There are a few things more disappointing than seeing their team's playoff hopes diminish by the midway point of the season.
The Jets are terribly coached. Their talent is overrated. This disaster of a season cannot possibly end fast enough.
With less than half a regular season to go, here's a look at 10 NFL teams whose 2024 seasons are officially over. New York Jets. Yeah, God, where do we even start here? Aaron Rodgers' return from a season-ending Achilles tear was supposed to make the Jets Super Bowl contenders. The mid-season trade for Davante Adams, coupled with the firing of head coach Robert Saleh, was supposed to give this team a much-needed jolt after an ugly 2-4 start. But nope, and no. As hard as it is to watch, Rodgers is just a shell of his former self. He is missing on easy throws and throwing interceptions at a rate that we are not used to seeing, especially for a guy with the best TD to INT ratio in history. Breece Hall was supposed to be a must-have for fantasy football, yet he's hardly been an impact player in the ground game. Davante Adams is producing like a number 3 wide receiver, and even Garrett Wilson isn't having the monster year that many had expected. Truth be told, Rodgers and the inept offense are just wasting the efforts of what has actually been a top 10 defense this year. When your 4-time league MVP and unofficial franchise decision-maker is the weakness, well, that's a bit of a problem. The Jets' last remaining playoff hopes sunk when they were crushed by the Arizona Cardinals in Week 10, dropping them to 3-7 on the year. Oh well, at least it's basketball and hockey season in the Big Apple now. Dallas Cowboys. Many of us expected the Cowboys to take a step back thanks to Jerry Jones's disastrous offseason, one in which he promised to have an all-in approach. But come on, let's be real. Even the biggest Cowboys haters didn't think it would be this bad. Seriously, where do we even start here? After going undefeated at home in the regular season for nearly 2 full years, the Cowboys were beaten down and humiliated in their first 4 games at Jerry World. Like, seriously, it is historically bad with how they are playing at home. Even before Dak Prescott had to undergo season-ending surgery on his hamstring, the $240 million man was playing well below his standards. And hey, newsflash, bringing back Ezekiel Elliott to lead the ground game with Rico freaking Dottle just blew up in Jerry's face. The worst part about all of this has to be that defense, though. Mike Zimmer was brought in to replace Dan Quinn after he left for the Washington Commanders head coaching vacancy. Quinn has the Commanders on a path to the postseason, while the Cowboys D can't stop a nosebleed. Go figure. Dallas' season ended once Prescott was ruled out for the year following an ugly Week 9 loss to the Atlanta Falcons, which moved America's team to 3-5 on the year. And then a week later, the Philadelphia Eagles humiliated them 34-6 at Jerry World. Cowboys fans aren't used to this, but I think it's undoubtedly time to hop onto the hashtag Team Tank train and just hope that they can land a top 5 pick. Jacksonville Jaguars. Remember when the Jaguars were 8-3 a year ago, coming off a trip to the Elite 8 and looking every bit like a Super Bowl contender? Last season's stunning collapse felt like a mirage for Doug Peterson's group. The team was simply far too talented to underachieve again, especially after bringing in new game changers like LSU wideout Brian Thomas Jr., speedster Gabe Davis, and defensive end Eric Armstead. And yet somehow, someway, Trevor Lawrence and company are frontrunners for the first overall pick of 2025. On Jacksonville's star-studded offense, only Thomas Jr. and Tank Bigsby have produced on a consistent basis. T-Law has inexplicably unraveled after signing a $275 million extension. Davis, Evan Ingram, and Travis Etienne Jr. have been invisible for long stretches. This year's Jaguars, honestly, are not far off from the disastrous 2021 campaign under Urban Meyer as far as on-play goes. And the worst part for owner Shad Khan? Well, there's just no easy way out of this mess after handing Lawrence over $250 million despite a miserable finish to last year. Oh boy. You know, we really feel for you, Jags fans. You really just can't have nice things. Tennessee Titans. Unlike the first 3 teams to be mentioned on this list, expectations were actually relatively low for the Titans coming into this year. They lost franchise star Derrick Henry to free agency, and everyone knew that DeAndre Hopkins would be traded before the deadline. Will Levis was an unproven commodity coming into his sophomore year. The O-line was leaky, and Calvin Ridley was never going to live up to that mammoth $92 million deal that he signed in free agency. So the Titans being near the very bottom of the standings is no surprise whatsoever. Unlike most of the other teams on this list, there are actually actually some positives to be found here. Tony Pollard has emerged as the new star running back in Music City as Henry's successor, playing the best football of his entire career. And the defense is actually a top-tier unit with a chance to finish #1 against the pass. The Titans are actually doing some things right in their rebuild. But lopsided losses to more competitive teams than the Buffalo Bills, Detroit Lions, and Los Angeles Chargers show that there is still a long way to go. Tennessee fans might as well just hope for a tank job that would put them in a spot to get a top quarterback prospect like Colorado's Shedeur Sanders or Georgia's Carson Beck. Landing one of those guys could turn this team into something special in the future. New England Patriots. Like the Titans, everyone knew that this was going to be a year of growing pains for the Patriots. I mean, come on, year one of the post-Bill Belichick era with the rookie head coach, quarterback, and de facto GM? Also, not to mention the worst set of offensive playmakers in football. The Pats turned some heads when they upset Joe Burrow and the Cincinnati Bengals on the road in Week 1, but that's turned out just to be a flash-in-the-pan moment. New England proceeded to lose its next 6 games, all but assuring a top 10 pick. The Patriots have mostly been non-competitive against tough competition, and, well, it didn't take long for head coach Jared Mayo to bench veteran Jacoby Brissett in favor of rookie Drake May. The number 3 pick of 2024 has shown some promise, but it's still pretty clear that there is plenty of room for improvement. A stunning road win against the Chicago Bears in Week 10 moved New England to 3-7 on the year. But come on, with an unforgiving schedule to close out the season, they would be so freaking lucky to finish with more than 5 wins. This season ended weeks ago in Foxborough. Now it's about gaining valuable experience and learning from it in year 1 of a full-scale rebuild. Carolina Panthers. The good news, with a victory over the equally hapless New York Giants in Germany, Carolina surpassed last year's win total of 2. The bad news? Well, the Panthers are still really bad at football. Bryce Young just hasn't done anything to show that he can be the answer at quarterback, and it's rather alarming that the offense has functioned better with Andy Dalton running it. Since Carolina is sure to finish with a top 10 pick that'll put them in position to take a top quarterback prospect, they have no reason to give Bryce Young a 3rd year at the controls. It'll be time to start over behind center. Again. The Panthers were far and away the NFL's worst team a year ago. The good news is that they're definitely not the worst team this year, but that's still setting the bar awfully low. Carolina's season was beyond saving when they started out 1-7. Once again, expect some major changes in the coming offseason. Cleveland Browns. Expectations were actually pretty high for a Browns team that finished 11-6 and made the postseason a year ago despite using 5 different starting quarterbacks. So I think it was pretty reasonable to think that Deshaun Watson would finally show some improvement at quarterback. But even before he suffered his season-ending Achilles tear against the Cincinnati Bengals, Watson was undoubtedly the worst quarterback in the game. A 1-6 record with 5 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, and 33 sacks taken while averaging a pathetic 164 passing yards a game? God grief, if that's what $230 million guaranteed can buy you, I don't know. Jim Schwartz's defense propelled the Browns to the postseason last year, but that unit has just regressed miserably this year. The ground game has been completely non-existent, even with Nick Chubb returning from injury. The Browns waved the flag by moving out number 1 receiver Amari Cooper and standout edge rusher Zadarius Smith ahead of the trade deadline. So at least they got some additional draft picks to help with an inevitable retooling phase. The Browns' difficult schedule ahead of them also means that they're in prime contention to finish with a top 5 pick. So surely they'll take Deshaun Watson's replacement, right? Las Vegas Raiders. There was reason for optimism heading into Sin City this year. I mean, they finished 5-4 under interim head coach Antonio Pierce, highlighted by a road win over the Kansas City Chiefs on Christmas Day. The Raiders finished with a top 10 defense for the first time since 2002 and added ex-Miami Dolphins star defensive tackle Christian Wilkins in free agency. But, well, because it's the Raiders, of course, those good vibes were dashed quickly. Their season has been just so bad. So bad that the big storyline has been Tom Brady joining the ownership group after having his bid for a minority stake approved. Yay! Gardner Minshew, Aiden O'Connell, and Desmond Ridder have played musical chairs at quarterback. The run game has been non-existent without Josh Jacobs, and the sluggish offense got even worse. Somewhat predictably, after they traded Devontae Adams. But hey, on the bright side, the Raiders have a realistic chance at coming away with Shedeur Sanders or Travis Hunter next year, so they got that. New York Giants. The good news for Jets fans in New York is that they're still not as bad as their Big Apple NFC rivals. Yeah, the Giants decided to give Daniel Jones a 6th season behind center, as if we didn't know how that would go. They watched Saquon Barkley leave for the arch-rival Philadelphia Eagles in free agency, only to turn in an MVP caliber year.
I'm gonna have a tough time sleeping if Saquon goes to Philadelphia, I'll tell you that.
Sadly, Jones and that wretched offensive line have just wasted excellent seasons from the likes of Malik Neighbors, Byron Tracy Jr., Darius Slayton, Dexter Lawrence, and Brian Burns. A club with that level of talent on both sides of the ball just can't afford to be this bad. I don't know how they're doing that. Miami Dolphins. The Dolphins' playoff hopes were dealt a giant blow when Tua Tagovailoa suffered a concussion in Week 2 against the Buffalo Bills. He was sidelined the next 4 games, and the Dolphins predictably cratered without a suitable backup QB in place. The Fins stood at 2-4 when Tagovailoa got the green light to return in Week 8 against the Arizona Cardinals. Then they proceeded to lose their next 2 games and fall to 2-6, all but ending any realistic hopes of actually reaching the postseason. So it's too little too late for Miami. To be fair, most teams don't remain competitive when their starting QB misses significant time with injury. Now it's about getting through 2024 and making the necessary roster improvements for next year. But hey, which NFL team do you think has been the biggest disappointment of 2024 so far? Let us know in the comment section below. If you liked this video and learned a thing or two, then clicking that like button helps out a ton. And you know, we really appreciate it. If this is your first time coming around to TPS though, then subscribing is a great idea because we put out videos like this every single day. But as always, thanks for watching and we'll see you guys next time.